Welcome, everybody. My name is Baylor Rice. I am a pharmacist and one of the clinical liaisons for Revelation Pharmacy, as well as South River Compounding Pharmacy here in Richmond, Virginia. So it's my pleasure to be able to present to everyone this afternoon on thyroid health. And as Tara said, we are recording this. So if you have to pop off for some reason or whatever, we will be sending a copy of the recording to you. Generally, that does take a couple of days to get that done and kind of do the intro and outro. So just be on the lookout for that. A few disclaimers, I'll let you read through those. And then to kind of get started. So with this, Revelation Pharmacy is really a family of community compounding pharmacies across the United States. We're adding more and more to the mix every day. So if you're watching this and wondering, well, I'm a Everwell pharmacy patient, and why is somebody from South River talking to me? Well, we're all one big family, so we all share and work together. So really, kind of economies of scale, if you will, under one big umbrella. And so that's really why you're seeing some different names on there. So really many states, many pharmacies represented here today. So really kind of very exciting for all of us. So we are specializing in natural medicine. So my background in history started in pharmacy many years ago, and really grew up as a family of pharmacists. My dad was a pharmacist. His brother was a pharmacist. My sister was a pharmacist. And so I had no choice other than going to pharmacy, if you will. And did my undergraduate at Virginia Tech here in Virginia, and then MCV for pharmacy school. I got out and I worked in a couple of my dad's stores. And I really realized very quickly, we're not healing anybody. You know, it was Band-Aid medicine. Here's one medication for this problem and then another medication for that. So that's really what propelled me into compounding pharmacy. That got me into looking at things a little bit differently. And for me, it all started with bioidentical hormones, which, if you look at our webinar schedule, that's going to be in a couple of months. We'll be talking about bioidentical hormones for females. And so that got me into bioidentical hormones, so natural hormone replacement therapy. And it was pretty interesting. I would start patients and getting them off of the synthetics, and next thing you know, we would drop the fluid pill, and then the antidepressant would drop off, and then the sleeping pill would drop off. And so over and over, I saw here was an otherwise healthy woman that in the course of about 6 months, all of a sudden was on a handful of medications. And then we would get her switched over on bioidentical hormones, and then all those periphery meds would really kind of start dropping off. And then all of a sudden I was getting postcards from people on vacation and homemade Kahlua, and husbands coming in with 6-packs of beer saying, thank you, I've got my wife back. And, that really opened my mind and eyes up to a whole world. So that's really what got me personally, started my journey into natural medicine and studying functional medicine, integrative therapies, complementary therapy. I don't care what name you put on it. Everybody kind of has a different skew. So really studied all of that, homeopathics, aromatherapy, etc. So I do offer personalized consultations, and we have other consultants within the Revelation Pharmacy group as well. So you can actually schedule a consultation with one of us. If you're local to one of the stores and somebody's there, you can see us in person. You do telephone, do Zoom, whatever is easiest, right? Trained in functional medicine, doing integrative therapy approaches. So really taking information. I am a scientist. I am a data guy. So I like data. So really, if you think about taking your personal history, your family history, your diet, your lifestyle, food, what you eat, your supplements, medications, all that, and what pertinent labs you have, pulling that together and getting a game plan for you, the patient, right? And so we do have access to a variety of different tools to look at testing a different way, whether it's saliva, hair, micronutrient, as well as we can do blood labs via our site with Ulta Labs, which is pretty exciting. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. let's see. And I see a couple of questions in there. I'm going to get to the questions. Put your questions in there. I will get all of those answered, but I'm going to probably push that and wait closer to the end, if that's okay. But I promise I will get to you. So I want to start with what I call my ADD slide. Okay. So by this, the hypothalamus regulates, whoops, didn't mean for that to go forward. The hypothalamus regulates the pituitary. Pituitary regulates the sex hormones, the thyroid, as well as the adrenals. Now, I'm sharing this with you because there's a very tight connection really all through here. So, and the adrenals push really, really hard back on the thyroid. But for today, our main focus today is going to be on the thyroid. I'm going to touch on the adrenals just a little bit later on in the presentation. Okay, so the thyroid gland. And what's interesting is that's still, I don't know if that's still on your screen or not, but that the annotations are still on my screen. Okay. Thyroid gland consists of many follicles, and this is enlarged by about 25 times on this piece. And so when you think about the feedback loop, so a minute ago I showed you a picture. Hypothalamus regulates pituitary. Pituitary is that feedback with the thyroid gland. So TSH, think thyroid stimulating hormone, the feedback between the pituitary and hypothalamus and the thyroid gland. So it's an inverse relationship. You need to understand that, number one. So when you go to the doctor, and I see this all the time, you know, you read in a book, you Google, you hear from a friend, whatnot. Well, you know what? Here's a list of all these thyroid symptoms, and I think I got a bunch of them, doc. You know, you go and see your practitioner. Hey, will you draw some thyroid labs? Well, one of the main ones they draw is TSH. So that's the feedback loop, right? And that feedback loop, the range on it generally with most labs in the US is about 0.45 to 4.5. Now, that's a tenfold. That's a wide range, right? Now, preferably, I like it less than 2, closer to 1. So generally, if you fall within that 0.45 to 4.5, you kind of get the pat on the back going, hey, you know, everything's okay. You fall within range. Well, you're sitting there scratching your head going, well, why, right? I'm sitting here reading all these checks off and boom, 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 boom. I've got all these symptoms, but it comes back normal. Why? Well, we're going to go over that today and talk a little bit about some additional labs we want to do. So one thing that we look at is that thyroid stimulating hormone, but then we also want to look at the free T3, reverse T3, free T4, et cetera. That's really where the rubber meets the road with this piece. And for general knowledge and information with that, as the TSH gets higher, that's generally a sign of more hypothyroid, sluggish thyroid, underactive. So think hypo, think sluggish, sluggish metabolism, sluggish energy, sluggish brain. So as that TSH number gets lower, more of a hyper. So have a harder time keeping weight on, kind of hyperactive, almost jittery type. So that's a little quick bit on that. So functions of the thyroid gland. Really metabolic hormone that regulates metabolism, temperature, immunity, cellular function, growth, development, energy, as I mentioned, helps with cancer, cardiovascular, brain function, fat breakdown, and utilization of oxygen. So a lot of functions the thyroid gland does. Now, what I want to share with you is the next 2 slides are questions I ask my patients. Okay, so this is on our questionnaire. So as you go through and look at this, so, you know, if you're going check, 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 checking off a number of these, then we want to look at labs. We want to look at numbers, and we want to look maybe a little bit deeper than just the TSH. So unusual fatigue unrelated to exertion, chillier than others, dressing in layers, anxiety leading to panic, trouble with weight, not losing a pound, And that's a big one we see pushing a lot of people, right? That's one of the first ones we see between energy and the weight loss piece that kind of pushes people into thinking and questioning about what's going on with the thyroid. Aches and pains unrelated to exercise, problems with digestion or allergies, mentally sluggish, focused, forgetful, certainly having a family history of it, dry skin, adult acne, going through the periods of depression or decreased sex drive, early graying hair, diabetes, anemia, rheumatoid arthritis, having family history of any of those or personal history, hair dry, easily falling out, significant menopausal symptoms or migraine despite hormone replacement, history of whiplash or neck injuries. And why on that? Certainly thyroid's right here in the neck. So certainly if you have a whiplash, that can give injury to the thyroid, and then that can really lead to improper production of thyroid hormone. Significant exposure to chlorine, bromine, or fluoride. Now, why that's important is because it's a hydrofluorocarbon, right? So, that can mess with that metabolism of the thyroid hormone. Feeling exhausted by evening, yet trouble sleeping, waking up tired, and having that subnormal thyroid temperature in the morning can be subthyroid. And I'm sorry, I keep trying to write on my screen and it's advancing the screen. So I apologize for that. Now, signs, symptoms more specifically of hyperthyroidism. And I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about hyperthyroidism. The main piece we're going to hit on today is going to be hypo. Why? Because the majority of patients we see are experiencing hypothyroidism versus hyperthyroidism. So I am going to spend more time on hypo versus hyper. But so for hyper, certainly we can see fatigue. We can also see nervousness. Generally, a lot of folks will have kind of a goiter, heat intolerance, hyperactivity, hypertension. Note hyper, right? Hyperthyroidism, as well as hyperactivity and hypertension. Palpitation, sweating, tremor, weakness, weight loss. All of those different things kind of pull in with that. So some options for autoimmune thyroiditis. So autoimmune thyroiditis. So really think about Hashimoto's falls under that category. So generally with an autoimmune thyroid, we're going to have kind of an oscillation of hypo. There's an inflammatory component. There's an immune component to the thyroid. Now, one thing I've got is absolutely gluten-free is an absolute must with that piece, right? So we must go and pull gluten out. Gluten is going to increase the inflammatory processes within the system. Pulling out that aspartame really gets metabolized to formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is what we preserve bodies with, right, when we die. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Splenda is chlorinated table sugar. So chlorinated. So when you're talking about thyroid, let's kind of do a quick aside. So we've got a thyroid backbone with 4 iodine molecules on it, okay? So what happens is our body really doesn't have any T4 receptors. So we have to metabolize out. So here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 iodine molecules on that molecular structure. So we have to cleave off. There's an enzyme we have in us called deiodinase. So deiodinase cleaves off one of those molecules to become the active T3 molecule. Well, half the time, whoopsie, it pulls off the wrong one. So that's called reverse T3, right? So that's an inactive molecule that goes and sits in the receptor, but the problem is it doesn't activate it. So if it's sitting in that receptor, it's blocking the free T3 from doing what it needs to do. So the reason why I wanted to do an aside with this piece is when you talk about chlorination, when you talk about people that do a lot of swimming or in hot tubs a lot, well, that's fine. Great exercise. Hot tubs are certainly fun. But the problem with that is you need to rinse off when you get out, because most of those are using chlorine to help keep the water clear and to help keep bacteria down, just like Splenda is a chlorinated table sugar. So that's screwing up these fluorohydrocarbons here, right? And can affect part of that metabolism. So some medications that can also affect that, certainly beta blockers, propylthiouracil, methimazole, as well as hydrocortisone. Now, one answer sometimes is certainly surgery. Another for autoimmune thyroiditis or severe hyperthyroidism, or radioactive iodine to really kind of blow out the thyroid. Okay. Certainly, those are extremes. And then, of course, we have compounded low-dose naltrexone. And by the way, I use low-dose naltrexone for all 105 of the autoimmune diseases I work with. Okay. So definitely very useful for that. So do a quick aside with low-dose naltrexone while we're here. So this is a compounded agent. So it does require a prescription. So we would need to work with your practitioner. Some mechanisms of action of LDN. LDN has a lot of mechanism of action, which is really pretty cool. Helps with immune function, helps with inflammation, helps heal corneal ulcers, Crohn's disease, downregulation of Th17. So really it kind of hits at that opioid receptor and really kind of inhibits a number of different inflammatory cytokines. So very neat molecule. I use LDN for a bunch of different areas. And typically we'll start with 1.5 milligrams at bedtime, do that for a week, and then go up to 2 of the 1.5s, which equals 3 milligrams for a week, and then titrate that up to 3 capsules, which gives you 4.5. So then thereafter, we stay on a 4.5 milligram dose. So then generally what we'll do is have the practitioner call in 2 scripts, one for like 60 of the 1.5s, and then a script to be used the next month that's 4.5. So then we can just stick with, one capsule at a time. Gluten-free grains. Now, I mentioned gluten-free is an absolute must with any autoimmune disease. So amaranth, teff, quinoa, basmati, or other brown rice, wild rice, millet, as well as buckwheat. You just want to make sure that it doesn't have soy sauce in it. Most soy sauce does contain wheat. You can get soy sauce that is gluten-free. Okay. Some nutritionals we think about with hyperthyroidism: PABA, thymus extract, selenium, vitamin C, B12. Now, typically, I'm going to gravitate towards a methylated form of B12 because half the population has what's called an MTHFR deficiency. So you're not able to metabolize B12 or folic acid properly. So I just put all my patients on methylated B as well as methylated folic acid to avoid that potential. Magnesium glycinate, cat's claw, L-carnitine, iodine, zinc. And zinc also helps lower the antibodies. So when those thyroid peroxidase antibodies are elevated, alpha-lipoic acid, which if earlier I drew you a picture. So if the reverse T3 is elevated, alpha-lipoic acid can help lower that reverse T3. B6, as well as our inflavonoid complex, which is a great natural anti-inflammatory combination with some curcumin in it, some hops, as well as a reduced iso-alpha acid extract. And active immune support, which has in it some NAC, it has quercetin, some vitamin C, and EGCG, which is a green tea catechin extract that does a great job as an antiviral and immune support. Side note, put together that formulation actually a number of years ago with the onset of COVID, did all the different research looking at the inflammasome process going on. And that's how we put that one together. But after using it for COVID, then I also found out, wow, it's doing an amazing job for my autoimmune patients. So again, the ingredients of this one, and really you can go up to 4 to 6 capsules a day for lower dosing. I'll have, for more of a preventative aspect, 1 to 2 a day, and then when things are flared up, certainly going up to 2 capsules 2 to 3 times a day. And certainly non-GMO and gluten-free formulation. So hypothyroidism, so some more specific symptoms surrounding that: brittle nails, cold hands and feet, cold intolerance, constipation, depression, difficulty swallowing, dry skin, cholesterol going up. Right. Now, that's an interesting one that a lot of people don't pay attention to. Right. So those that are menopausal or andropausal, which are the male menopause, right? So what do we see as the hormones start dropping off? Right. We see cholesterol going up as the estrogen starts dropping for females. We also see cholesterol going up as the testosterone drops for males. And then we also see cholesterol go up as the thyroid gets off. So, a lot of times this kind of hits at that perfect storm or unperfect storm, if you will, to where we've got multiple dynamics in the endocrine system going off. And then all of a sudden cholesterol is going up. And then again, going back to my illustration earlier of, chasing our tails here. Let's take one medication for one thing and then take another medication for the side effect. I time out, right? Let's take a step back and look at, why is this starting in the first place? Let's get to the root cause, right? Essential hypertension, eyelid swelling, fatigue, hair loss, hoarseness, hypotension. So lower blood pressure, trouble concentrating, infertility, irritability, menstrual irregularities, cramps, muscle weakness, nervousness, memory, slower heartbeat, throat pain, weight gain. Right. So all of those are, and you don't necessarily have to have all of them, but really those are some of the key hypothyroid symptoms that we see. So again, if you're going check, 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 we need to look a little bit deeper than just the TSH. Okay. So some factors that can affect that conversion of tetraiodothyronine, which is T4, to triiodothyronine, which is T3. So medications, your beta blockers, birth control pills, synthetic estrogen, iodine contrasting agents, lithium, phenytoin, steroids, and as well as theophylline. Nutrient deficiencies, chromium, copper, iodine, iron, selenium, zinc, B12, B6, B2, as well as vitamin A. So, those are some things that we need to think about, that if you're on those medications, that can be affecting that conversion. Diet-wise, cruciferous vegetables as well as soy can affect it. Now, I'm not saying don't eat soy, and I'm not saying don't eat cruciferous vegetables. Now, some of you may be saying, hey, great, Baylor said don't eat broccoli. Yahoo, I'm off the hook. No. Just don't go nuts with it. Okay. I had a patient about 20 years ago that the labs just kept being goofy, and we were working with her. She was doing all the right stuff. And then further investigation into it, she was eating 2 pounds of broccoli a day. No wonder why we were still having an issue, right? That was absolutely overboard. Okay. And then, of course, other things in general, aging process, right? Alcohol. Again, I'm not necessarily saying don't drink alcohol, but in moderation. Be smart about it. Lipoic acid, too much lipoic acid can be a problem. Diabetes, fluoride, lead, mercury, surgeries, stress, radiation, pesticides, as well as obesity. So all of those different things can be affecting that T4 to T3 conversion. So again, when we're working with patients, we want to be thinking about all these aspects and really coming up with a protocol of what's going to get to the root and help you. So, Baylor, what if I have hypothyroidism? What are some of the options? Well, I'll start with some prescription options. Certainly the most popular are using T4, right? That's what most endocrinologists and most primary cares kind of go to. So your Synthroids, Levothyroids, Levoxyl, Unithroid, lots of different names. So, you do have generic levothyroxine, right? And then we can also compound T4. Now, you may say, well, why would you want to compound it when it's available commercially? There needs to compound something, there has to be a reason, right? So if you had an allergy or a sensitivity to one of the inactive ingredients, then that's where we could come in and do a specific compounded T4. T3, T4 combination. So your things like Armour Thyroid, Nature Thyroid, NP Thyroid, all commercial products. They are glandular, so they come from porcine, the porcine gland, and extracted out, and they've got a ratio of T3, T4. Now, so can we also compound that? Absolutely. I've compounded T3, T4 combinations for years, as well as the thyroid USP. Why we would compound those, many different reasons. Again, the inactive ingredients in those products, or, let's say, for instance, 60 milligrams was too much, 45 was too little, and we needed to do something in between. We could compound 55.5 milligrams, right? Or if we needed to compound a specific T4, T3 combination, right? To where the ratio of what's in the glandular product wasn't quite right, your labs were still off, then we could use a specific amount for you of T4 as well as T3, right? Again, anytime we compound something, that is going to require the engagement of your practitioner, which is going to require a prescription. But we're always happy to help with that. Other options, certainly your T3, Cytomel, commercially only is 5 micrograms and 25 micrograms. It does have sucrose, and it is an immediate release product. So the problem with that is T3 has a 2-hour half-life. So it's a very quick time to where you get peak plasma concentration. So when we compound that, we compound it in what's called an E4M base. So it really offers it as a sustained release, extended release preparation. So it's releasing more over about an 8 to 10 hour time period. So we get a much better blood level of the T3. And that's, and really, quite honestly, that's why a lot of docs, I think, don't like working with the T3, because they see such funky results with it. Again, that's going to that, when you think about half-lives, it's just very short versus, over more extended time period, to where you can get what's called, us geeks in pharmacy world call that area under the curve. Okay. So we want a nice area under the curve so we can get good drug distribution. Okay. I'm going to read this to you. I generally, as you can tell, I really don't read right off the slides. I kind of just go with it. Desiccated thyroid is not consistent from dose to dose. This is from the Federal Registrar, August 14th, 1997. In 1997, the FDA reported no currently marketed orally administered levothyroxine sodium product has been shown to demonstrate consistency, potency, and stability, and thus no currently marketed orally administered levothyroxine product is generally recognized as safe and effective. A lot of you may be thinking, wow, holy smokes, I'm on some levothyroxine sodium, so wait a second. My point with sharing this with you is, so often I'll work with docs and variety of practitioners, and patients will say, well, the doctor didn't want to put me on a thyroid USP preparation because they're inconsistent, or the doc didn't want to do compounding because how do they know what it is? Well, guess what? That's where I love pulling this out and saying, hey, doc, by the way, are you familiar with this from the FDA? Right? I like having that in the back pocket, and that gets a lot. I'm going, okay, maybe I'll be open to trying something different. At the end of the day, I tell every single patient, you're the boss, you're in charge. It's your health. Our job is to guide you, educate you, and get you to where you want to be. Okay. But ultimately, it's your decision of what you want to do and what you don't do. So if you've got a practitioner that's not drawing the labs for you, that's not writing the script that's necessary for your case, easy answer, fire him or her and get a good new practitioner. There are plenty of great practitioners out there, and we can always work with you. One of our locations can work with you, somebody local that will work with you and help get you to where you need to be. Now, monitoring, very important. You've heard me talk about TSH, and that isn't necessarily exactly what we just want to look at. Most practitioners, and this is, again, American medicine, good, bad, indifferent, it is what it is, right? They'll order what's called a TSH with a reflex T4. So they'll look at, and generally it's total T4 versus free T4, but sometimes both. So they'll look at the feedback loop, right? Well, the feedback loop isn't telling you everything, right? I want to know what's in the bucket. I want to know actually not just the feedback loop, but I want to know, where that free T3 is, free T4, reverse T3. Remember that T4, right? The T4 gets metabolized either into reverse T3 or free T3, right? So when the body is really more preferential to that reverse T3 and that reverse T3 is increasing and this is decreased, then you're displacing that receptor, and therefore your actual TSH can look quote unquote normal, but yet you still got all these symptoms. That's why we want to see this data, because if this is elevated and this is down, then we don't have the rubber meeting the road where we want it. Okay. I also want to look, if you haven't had this done, I want to look at what your TPO and thyroid antibodies are. Do we have an inflammatory autoimmune issue going on with the thyroid? Right? If you haven't had the labs done, we don't know. Ferritin. Ferritin looks at iron stores. And I'll hit some women that, oh, honey, I haven't had a period for 20 years. Why do we need to look at that? Well, you were bleeding for a number of years. If you never did anything to rebuild your stores and your stores were depleted back during times of having regular cycles, then they're still going to be depleted. Why that's important, as well as the vitamin D. Both of those affect how the triiodothyronine, which is the active thyroid hormone, binds at the receptor level. That's huge. So I've actually seen all the labs, again, be within what I would call a normal place, but yet these actually in the toilet and still throwing off symptoms. Get those balanced, symptoms abate and get better. We can also certainly look at red blood cell magnesium, selenium, and zinc, because those are absolutely important for that T4 to T3 conversion. Generally, I don't start out of the box with those. Generally, this piece up here, I'll change the color because I know I'm getting busy with that. That piece up there is where we're looking. Now, if the answer is, well, Baylor, I have gone to my practitioner and the practitioner is only drawn the TSH and T4, they're not doing the other, then go to our website, southriverrx.com. We've got a tab under the services tab. You'll pull down and you'll see the Ultra Lab testing. You can click that. It takes you to what's called a microsite. So it's a site within our site. So we have an agreement with Ultra Lab, and we set this up because I found many, many years ago, I've got a lot of patients that aren't able to get the labs they want drawn, right? For whatever reason. It may be the doctor's just not doing them, or their insurance isn't paying for it, or they've got a high deductible, or maybe they don't have any insurance. So we've got an agreement with Ultra Lab to where it gives you about 83% off retail pricing on labs, which is fantastic. So you go in, you plug in what you want, and we've got with all of this stuff already there, we've got something called the South River Thyroid Panel that already has all that there. So you just click that, you know exactly what you're paying. We've got lab sites all over the US. You pick it, you pay it, you know what you're paying, and then boom, you go have it done. And then pop, about the next day, it shows up in your portal and you've got the labs, and we can rock and roll from there. Now, the exciting thing is later at the end of the presentation, I've got a 20% off coupon for you for Ultra Labs that you'll be able to use to have labs drawn if you need to. Okay. Temperature. As I mentioned, also, if you're running a subnormal temperature, that's another sign that something's off with the thyroid. We need to look deeper. Adrenal labs, okay? Now, adrenals push on the thyroid really super duper hard. So if you didn't catch our adrenal webinar, it is archived. You can go in and see that. And ultimately, stress. So, I mean, if you've had a lot of stress, fatigue, decreased energy, concentration, decreased sex drive, trouble sleeping, those are some of the main things. Bruising easily, swollen, puffy all over. Exhausted, craving sugars, carbs, right? So if you're going, oh, check, you got my attention, Baylor, then let's look at a cortisol, Let's look at DHEA. Now, typically cortisol I want to look at with saliva. Why? Because blood doesn't do a good job here, because blood's a single spot in time. I want to know what your level is before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner, before bedtime. So there should be what's called this diurnal pattern with regard to cortisol. So the best way to do that is spitting in some tubes. So if that's ding dong, that's me, then let's get you, you'll have the email of Allison, our patient care coordinator, at the end, one of the end slides. You can pop Allison an email and she can coordinate getting you a kit, send it to you. You spit in the tubes of the comfort of your own home. It's got FedEx already. You package it up, send it off. We get the results back in a couple of weeks. Sex hormones, I've got that on there just because, you know, if you've got a lot of menopausal stuff or andropausal stuff, then definitely I want to look at sex hormones too. And remember, labs detect disease, not optimal function. You know, for all of these, okay, just don't think, well, I'm going to get the labs back, look at the labs and assess it myself. Okay. Why that's a mistake. Again, TSH 0.45 to 4.5 is the range. I like it less than 2, preferably closer to 1. Reverse T3, again, has a range of about 12 to 23. Well, I want it 15 or less. Free T4, I want at least up to about 1.2. And that can have a range on the lab anywhere from about 0.7 to 1.5. Free T3, depending on the lab, again, can have a fairly large range. So most all of these are going to have a large range. I want optimal. I'm going to pull that into a much more narrow range for you. Optimal function, right? It's just not good enough to say, this is good enough. No. I want the bar high, right? Let's see how high we can get the bar and then push back long-term disease. Basal body temperature. So this is how you do that. You'll use a basal thermometer on awakening before your feet hit the floor. Okay, put it in the armpit before your feet hit the floor. Women, if you're menstruating, start the second day of menstruation. Postmenopausal women or men, any day of the month is fine. Thyroid normal for that should be about 97.8 to 98.2. You know, if certainly we're looking at rectal or oral, then that's going to be higher at 98.6 plus. So let's talk about nutrients for the thyroid. What can I do nutrient herbally to help support thyroid function? So if anyone's watched me before, you know, I kind of start with baseline. Again, foundation. I like easy, and I like making things relatable to everybody. It's like building a house, right? You need a solid foundation before you put the roof and the skylights in. Our phytonutrient therapeutic multi, food-based multi with methylated Bs. As I spoke earlier, 50% of the population has an MTHFR deficiency. So I hedge my bet and I put everybody on methylated Bs. It's not that much more expensive to do it. With a methylation deficiency, folks, we see increase in cardiovascular disease and an increase in neurological disease. Okay. Fish oils, omega-3 essential fatty acids, good for everything head to toe, whether you want to do it with a capsule or our fish oil. And you may say, oh, Lord, I don't want to take an oil. Our oil is clean. It is not that nasty, fishy aftertaste. It's very clean. Slight taste of fish. Of course, it's fish oil. Fish tastes like fish, right? But it shouldn't be disgusting. Vitamin D3 with some K2. I'll certainly go higher than 5,000 IUs if we've got labs. And then CBD. CBD hits 220 systems of the human body. Inflammation, helps with regulation of a variety of systems. So generally, I'm going to do at least 15 milligrams a day. Most of my patients, you know, as far as a baseline, about 25 to 30 milligrams. If you have an autoimmune or an inflammatory issue, then certainly we're going to go 50 milligrams plus. So thyroid support complex. We put this formula together, really helping with that T4 to T3 conversion. So as you look through this, you'll notice most of these nutrients, when I went back and was going through what you may be deficient in that affects thyroid function, etc., boom, this is it. Now, this is an adaptogenic formula. Now, in most medicine, traditional medicine rather, adaptogenics really are unheard of, right? Adaptogenics, if it's low, it helps bring it up. If it's high, it helps bring it down. So it's a modulator. So no harm, no foul. You may say, well, Baylor, I'm on thyroid medication now. Can I take that? Absolutely. You can take it with thyroid medication. You take it without thyroid medication. It's not going to take the place of your thyroid medication if truly you've got a T4 or T3 deficiency, but it is going to help assist in proper metabolism of that deiodinase enzyme and helping take that tetroidothionine down to T3. Typical dosing on this is 1 capsule 3 times a day. So 1 breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm not going to read through all this, but this just kind of gives you additional information on why I put together the formulation the way I did. Retin, certainly vitamin A, vitamin D3. We've got data history on all of these nutrients that are in this formula. There's studies on every single individual ingredient. Okay. Now, I'll point out, I do want to point this out with this one. So with zinc, certainly there's many different forms of zinc. Typically, I prefer either a zinc glycinate or a zinc picolinate. If you dose zinc pretty high, once you get up to about 50 milligrams, it can deplete your copper. And then if you deplete copper, we can see some neurological issues. So generally, if you're up to about 50 milligrams plus, then we need to also supplement with 2 to 4 milligrams of copper. Now, we do have a liquid, really it's a zinc taste test, right? It's a liquid form of zinc you use not for replacement, but you use it for holding in your mouth for about 10 seconds. And if it has a strong metallic taste, then you're fine with zinc. If it tastes like water, then that's a really quick, inexpensive way to test zinc to find out if you're deficient, right? And then we kind of know how to dose from there. So thyroid supplements, again, we go to the basics, right? And then additional support. Our thyroid support complex is really my first go-to. We also have a formulation that's a little bit different than that called thyroid complex. Thyroid 150. I only use this formulation if I have labs. Why? Because unlike these two that are adaptogenic formulas, thyroid 150 is only for hypothyroid. It is going to lower a TSH. It works beautiful for that. So there many times we've been able to keep people off of thyroid medication and or lower their dose or avoid it altogether. It really will kind of throw a spark into the fire, so to speak. So let's talk about common adrenal symptoms for a second. Okay. I mentioned all these earlier. Let me go back. So if you're checking off a bunch of these and go boom, 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 check, and or you've got a few of them, but they're more, I ask my symptoms in a question. Thyroid, it's simply yes, no. But for adrenal and my sex hormone questions, I do it via columns: absent, mild, moderate, severe, right? So if you're kind of that moderate to severe on it, on a few of these, then okay, wait a second, we need to be thinking about maybe looking at that cortisol and looking at it a little bit deeper. Again, why are we talking about that? Is because that huge negative feedback loop, I mean, it serves as an emergency brake, if you will, on that thyroid. All of these affect each other, okay? There's all interplay here. But this is the biggest negative feedback, okay? So what I have found is it generally takes about 10 years for the function of the thyroid gland to catch up with the labs, which is why, you can go to your doc and ask for labs and they can be normal. And then you go in the next year, all right, well, doc, I read in 10 different things this year that I've got more symptoms and normal. And then finally, 10 years later, all of a sudden, bam, instead of the postcard WNL within normal limits, you actually get a phone call saying, hey, Mrs. Johnson, that's my default name, that real patient name. I know what your problem is. You've got a thyroid problem. And you're sitting there going, come on, man. I've had the same symptoms the last 10 years I've been telling you about. I feel no different. Well, finally, the feedback loop caught up with itself. Okay. So I like to catch it before we hit that point. So again, some of the formulations we use, and our cortisol support formula is very analogous to the thyroid support complex. It is an adaptogenic, no harm, no foul. Adrenal support is very similar to that. L-theanine. L-theanine helps balance norepinephrine and epinephrine. In short, kind of takes that weight off the shoulders. Tranquil, if we have a lot of stress and worry. That's an old Chinese formula that dates back about 2,000 years, actually. And then certainly cranking up the CBD if we need to go higher than just a baseline on that. Certainly we will. Quality. I'm a stickler for quality. I've shared this with many, but I'll share it with you guys today. I actually go and I visit the companies we deal with. I tour their labs, I tour their facilities, I look at what's called their C of A's, I look at their standard operating procedures. Are they doing what they say that they're doing? Why? It's my reputation on the line. It's collectively all of us working together. I want to see a result, and therefore 80% of what's on the market space in the supplement world does not contain what it says it does on the label. So I want to be able to assess, and if we're not seeing the results, not wonder, I wonder if it was a bad batch or bad lot. I want to be able to go, well, were you taking it? Oh, like I had a patient this morning. Well, it's like, hey, how did that enzyme formula work for you? Oh, well, I don't know. I really wasn't taking it. Well, it's not going to do you any good if you don't take it. So, boom, let's retry that. So, but if you've been taking it and following directions, if we're not seeing results, and we don't have to wonder, I wonder if it was a bad batch or bad lot, then we know, okay, maybe that wasn't the right formulation for you, or, what else is going on, asking additional questions and figuring out, well, maybe there's something else pushing it from another way that we need to be thinking about. Diet. TSH increases when we don't have a good source of protein in the diet, right? So we need to make sure we have high quality protein in the system. Most important meal of the day, typically breakfast. Most important meal of the day for protein is breakfast. So we want to make sure we have at least 15 to 20 grams of protein in at breakfast. So for some patients, I'll use a meal replacement shake. We've got some fantastic plant protein meal replacements. Also, many thyroid imbalance patients are hypoacidic, so we don't have enough hydrochloric acid in the system. So with those, then we'll use something called digestive support or Medigest, which is basically a betaine, HCl, glutamic acid to help increase that stomach acidity, to help break things down. Overall, my baseline is Mediterranean style diet, 5-6 small meals a day, lots of color of the rainbow, fresh, organic, free range, as organic and free range as possible. Now, I deal with everyday folks. I also deal with high performance athletes. So there is a thing of over exercising, doing it too much. So I wanted to share that with you. So, if you're training for a triathlon or something like that and going like a banshee, that can have a negative impact and feedback loop to the thyroid. So we want to be aware of that. Okay. There are lots of different books out there, certainly on thyroid, adrenals, sex hormones. This is a list of some of my favorites. Most of all of these are available in paperback. Many libraries I've found have them. Most of them are less than $15. It is balance, right? So it's not just the hormones, right? But it's also balanced. Are we getting 8 hours of straight sleep, right? Are we getting exercise? Are we healthy overall? Do we have supportive relationships? Far too often we have negative Nellies in our life that every time, that caller ID shows up, it's like, oh God, I don't want to talk to them. Guess what, folks? Get them out of your life. Cut them out, right? Have supportive people around you. Have a good network. Make sure your nutritional balance is there, having hormonal balance, having a clean environment, right? Versus ill health, being overweight, high stress, etc. So it is a balance of many things there. Certainly we want to think about and take into consideration. So an overview, because I know we've gone over an awful lot this afternoon. So again, our everyday essentials, right? Our phytonutrient multi, the fish oils, D3, 5,000 IUs as a baseline, CBD, bringing in thyroid support complex. If you've got an autoimmune component piece of that, then adding that active immune support, 1 capsule twice a day. If you've got a lot of stress, adrenals are impacted, let's bring in cortisol support, 1 with breakfast, 1 with lunch. If you're kind of feeling overwhelmed, kind of focus, concentration's out the window, L-theanine is fantastic. You can go up to 4 times a day. You can even take 2 capsules at bedtime. You know, if you're just getting ready to go to bed and the mind's is still kind of racing, that'll kind of help take the weight off the shoulders. Sleep. Again, I want you sleeping 8 hours straight. Part of the reason for that is that's going to allow the adrenals to kind of hit that reboot and reset aspect. So the Boxley's Organic Sleep Soft Gels or Gummies, combination of CBD with CBN. CBN is a specific cannabinoid that does a fantastic job for sleep with a little bit of melatonin in there. 1 at bedtime, typically about an hour or 2 before bed. Or we can do Delta 8 THC gummies, been an absolute game changer for a lot of our patients. Generally, you want to do those a couple hours before bedtime. This does contain THC, so it will pop off a drug test. So if you get drug tested at work, avoid those. Also, no driving or heavy machinery. Same precautions as alcohol. Or our ultimate sleep formula. So that's an herbal formulation of several herbs and some nutrients to help support sleep. Generally, we start with 1 capsule, do 1 for a night or 2. If that doesn't work, go to 2. If that doesn't work, then we go to 3. So we kind of ramp that up. Again, I want 8 hours straight. If you're not sleeping 8 hours straight, we need to think about it. You know, an aside on, CBD statement from NIH, National Institutes of Health, modulating the endocannabinoid system may have therapeutic potential in almost all diseases affecting humans. So if you're sitting there wondering, well, why in the world, does Baylor have CBD in as kind of baseline? Well, there you have it. And I can't give you a negative for it. Very well tolerated. Again, you can click our YouTube channel. We've got a whole host of variety of previously recorded webinars in the system. So go online, subscribe to the channel. Then that way, every time we upload something new, you'll get a little bing. And that helps us. We appreciate it. We don't charge for these webinars because we believe in offering service to our patients and taking excellent care of you. So it is our honor to be here for you. So thank you for that. I did tell you about webinar special. So if you go to our site and click that Ultalab site, when you go to checkout, there will be a place for a coupon code. So enter SRCP 2023, and that'll give you 20% off. So that'll help you get in there and get some labs and save a little bit of money first of the year. So what's next? Certainly starting on the baseline regimen, going to one of your local Revelation locations. You can order online. We can ship all over. Have some labs drawn if you don't have anything recent. Or if you've had some recent and it's only TSH, then let's fill in the gaps with what else. Once you get those back, then email Allison. She's at patientcare@revcustomrx.com. And she can get you scheduled for a consultation. Again, we can do that phone, WebEx, Zoom, in person if you're local, or you can fly in. Doesn't matter. We've had that too. Certainly, if you've got a lot of adrenal symptoms, okay, then let's think about looking at the cortisol piece. So cortisol times 4 plus DHEA. So very important information to look at if we need it. So questions, I know we've got some questions in Q&A, so I'm going to pull those up now. If you would take time, give us a review, like us on Facebook and the variety of social media channels. Our next webinar is February 15th at 2 p.m. It is on heart health, which certainly I'll pull that up. Let's see the next slide. It's got a QR code, so you can take your phone right now and take a picture of it and register while I'm talking if you want to multitask here. So while you guys are putting in some other questions, I'm going to answer what we've got in the system already for you. If my Hashimoto's thyroiditis is well controlled, did I develop lichen sclerosis? I'm not sure if you meant, could you? You could. I mean, both of them are autoimmune diseases. Both of them have an inflammatory component. So you could certainly have Hashimoto's thyroiditis as well as lichen sclerosis. If you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, does that mean you're going to get lichen sclerosis? No, not necessarily so. So good question. Whenever I get my TSH at an okay level, currently 2.4, my T3 goes too low to 0.5. That is definitely too low. How do I balance? Well, you asked that question early on, so I hope, Mary, we have answered that now. We need to look at free T3, free T4, and reverse T3. We need to look at the reverse T3. We need to see, you're more than likely what's happening is you're metabolizing that T4 down into reverse T3. So it's a balance there. That's how we get balance. We need to look at all the data to really assess how we shift that. So more than likely, you're going to need more than just T4, tetrahydrothionine, levothyroxine, sodium. You're going to probably need a little bit of T3 in there, and or using something like the thyroid support complex to help with that metabolism. Why no gluten with hypothyroidism? I've had small bowel biopsy that was negative for celiac disease. Okay, so I didn't say no gluten for hypothyroidism. I said no gluten if you have autoimmune disease. So if you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis or any one of the 105 autoimmune diseases, then no gluten. Now, side note, even though you've had a biopsy and it came back negative for celiac, that doesn't necessarily mean you don't have an issue with gluten. I'll see issues with gluten all the time, even with negative biopsies. And I'll probably get more to that later this spring. We're going to be having a webinar on GI health, so I'll get more in depth on that then. Are the blood work covered by insurance for patients? If you get here's the key with that. If you engage your practitioner and get your practitioner to order the labs, then yes, most of the time the insurance is going to pay for that, right? So yes, absolutely. I advocate getting the labs the most cost-effective way you can. If your practitioner won't order the labs, then one of two things: get a new practitioner, or you can order that through our Ulta Lab site. The difference is ordering it through the Ulta Lab site, it is cash, it is out of pocket, so it is circumventing the insurance. But again, it's about 83% off of retail. So especially for those high deductible patients, that works really well. And then you can also use your HSA card for that. So hopefully that answers that question for you. Next question, looking for help with hair loss. Certainly hormonal balance. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA can affect it. Thyroid can affect it. Adrenal can affect it, as well as nutrient deficient in biotin. So we've got a formulation called Regenerage that has some nutrients in it that does a very nice job of helping with hair. We also have a hair, nails, and skin formula. But as far as in this arena, Lord knows there's about 20 questions we could go down a rabbit hole asking you about hair loss. One other thing there, again, for hair loss, a lab I like to see is ferritin. Okay. Now, ferritin, normal for ferritin for most labs is about 15 to 150. I like it around 80 to 90. I will, especially more with my menopausal females, I'll see low ferritin associated with hair loss. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean every time we have hair loss, it's a low ferritin, but with some hair loss, I do see some association with a low ferritin. So that is one rule out, if you will, that I like to see. I like to rule that one out for you. At the same time, I have hair growing on my face. I am female and postmenopausal. So hair loss and hair growing on the face. So, dear, I would say we need to look at some hormone levels. Okay. So I want to see total estrogen, progesterone, total and free testosterone, DHEA sulfate, and sex hormone binding globulin. Okay. I want to see what's going on with the hormones, with the female hormones. Now, could we also look at thyroid too? Yes, depending on your symptoms. If you're checking off a bunch of those thyroid symptoms, then yes, we want to look at that. But definitely I want to look at the sex hormones and see where those are and see what imbalances we have there, since we've got hair gone some places and come in others. So those were some excellent questions. Any other questions this afternoon? Again, I'll give you just a minute for that. Again, I'll remind you that next month, February 15th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, heart health and what we can do supplement-wise to help support a healthy heart. Do we have a webinar on schizophrenia or any supplements you suggest? Is there anything you could help with a consult? Schizophrenia, I don't foresee doing a consult specific on that because that's fairly narrowed. But that I would say consult wise, yes. And with a consult, I would say also what I would want to see, we can do a neurotransmitter test. So it's a urine test that we look at neurochemistry. So we look at norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, PEA, glutamate, GABA, and dopamine. It's a great urine test. We get, again, those labs back in about 3 weeks. So email Allison. I'll go backwards here if it'll let me. Email Allison at patient care. Okay, at patientcare@revcustomrx.com. So number one, she can get a consult scheduled up for you. And number two, she can get a kit sent out for you so we can look at those neurotransmitters. And definitely, I've got tricks up my sleeve and we can definitely help you, and happy to do that. Another question came up. Does Ultalab also test for sex hormones? Absolutely, they sure do. Ultalabs, you can have any blood test you want pretty much under the sun in there. It's really pretty cool. You can go down some rabbit holes looking at some things. Yes, and we do have female panels as well as we have male panels that I've already kind of put together that John, our rep there, is great to deal with. You know, I emailed him the other day saying, hey, John, you know, would you mind providing me a 15% off coupon for our patients for the webinar today? And he replied back, he said, Baylor, here's the code, and no, let's do 20%. I said, God bless you, John. Thank you. That's fantastic. So they've been fantastic to work with. And so he has put together special panels for me that I request very often with some extra discounts too. What effect is blood pressure meds having on my thyroid? Well, thyroid, you know, whether it's hyper or hypo, can have an effect, number one, on thyroid function, but then depending what medication you're on, that can also have an impact on thyroid itself. So we can kind of get it from both angles. So from that aspect, you know, I'd really say, Jill, that's going to fall under a consult perspective that, you know, let's get the data, let's get your labs, let's set up a time and go over that and put our heads together and figure out what's going on specifically in your case. All right, guys. Well, I don't see any other questions. I want to thank everybody for your attention today. Well, one more did just pop in. Do you create bioidentical hormone creams based on the lab results from Ultalabs? Yes. So for bioidentical hormones, we do that based on lab results, whether it's Ultalab, or we can also look at those labs via saliva for hormones. And we get that. We have you fill out about a 7-page questionnaire. We go through all that history, personal history, family history, your symptoms, the labs, and really, again, the first thing I ask on is, what are your goals? What are your objectives? What do you want to try to accomplish? And so, again, as I said, you're the boss, you're in charge. So then we put together a protocol to achieve that. So, yes, it is kind of marrying your symptoms, your history, your story with the lab results. So it makes sense. So I just don't treat a lab and I just don't treat a symptom. Which MD would be more likely to order the test, OBGYN, endocrinologist, or PCP? So if you're talking sex hormones would more than likely be the OBGYN. If you're talking thyroid labs, you're talking either the endo or the PCP. I will have some OBGYNs order thyroid if you have a good relationship with them. So again, it all kind of depends on your specific doc and your relationship. Question, are they natural or synthetic? And I think you're still going down the hole with the bioidentical hormones. So bioidentical hormones, when we're talking sex hormones, definitely natural. So they're derived from soy as well as yam, go through about 4 extraction processes. So at the point we use it, really I use the term bioidentical because it is biologically identical to the human molecule. What we use, thyroid compounded in the lab, we'll use, depending on the situation, we'll use a bioidentical T3 or bioidentical T4, or if we use thyroid USP, which is there again, glandular from porcine, that is a natural, natural derivation. Excellent questions today. I'll put that code up one more time for you right there. With regards to one other question came in about functional medicine docs, really get in touch with your local Revelation pharmacy who you work with. I'm sure one of their staff there can do that. As you know, we work with, and I work with patients all over the country. So that, depending where you are, I don't want to just do that right off the cuff. You know, if you're here local with us, reach out to Allison and she can take care of that for you. Question came in. I have been last year diagnosed with genetic hemochromatosis, but also in the last 3 years having thyroid biopsies due to concerns with nodules. Just have many symptoms that seem related to thyroid issues, have some general blood work, but have been cautious with taking supplements due to the hemochromatosis. So a questionable concern, stand still not to raise that ferritin level as well. Right. So with hemochromatosis, we wouldn't want to increase that ferritin level because already your hemotin level is probably already through the roof with your iron stores. So with that, we definitely want to look at the other thyroid stuff. We want to look at the adrenal piece. So with you, definitely reach out to Allison. Let's set up a consult. Let's get you to get a full thyroid panel and really kind of go through that. And last question for today, we'll wrap it up with this, is estradiol bioidentical? Yes, so estradiol micronized is bioidentical. Typically, when I'm working with patients, I'm going to use a 50-50 mix, though, of estradiol and estriol. Estriol is a weaker estrogen. It's safer. And there is data showing estriol is non-proliferative to the breast tissue. So I like using a combination. So the estriol helps with some breast health and breast protection. And of course, bioidentical progesterone helps to protect the breast, as well as it helps with osteoblast formation. So we get rebuilding of the bone. So with that, we will call it a day, folks, because we are past the hour. We had wonderful questions today, great attendance. Thank you all so much. Happy to help. Reach out to us. Let us know. And until next month, so long. Happy New Year.